In previous videos, I have expressed why I think this giant and this Celtic warrior are the same person, and why I believe they are both Dillion. Now it's time I express my thoughts on why I think this giant and this Celtic warrior should be Dillion, and what opportunities this can bring to the narrative of Hellblade 2. First and foremost, we have to understand a core basic when it comes to Hellblade's storyline, and that is, who is Dillion, what role he plays in the story, why he matters and should never be forgotten or discarded. To be honest, Dillion is, at times, even more significant a character than the Saint Senua, because Senua's story and its morals is incomplete without him. Now, this might sound strange to many of you, but hear me out. This all starts with the same creator of this story and characters, Tamín Antoniades. Between Senua and Dillion, which one of these two is the more alike to their creator? The answer is obvious: Dillion. Tamín Antoniades is not a victim of mental illness, and he did not make the game only to honor victims of mental illness, but to show us, the sane ones, the horrors these people undergo with traumatizing frequency. Why did Tamín Antoniades, a sane person, decide to get involved with mentally disturbed people? Well, the answer, according to what he himself said once, is because he had a friend that suffered mental illness, and he wanted to understand what his friend was going through. Seeking information about the topic, he realized the depth of the suffering these people undergo each day, along with how big the number of mentally ill people out there is, and he, an experienced video game designer, found the inspiration to make a virtual experience portraying the accounted psychotic experiences of those survivors. After the original game's success, Ninja Theory, instead of moving on and make their next innovative action game, decided to make a permanent change in the studio and focus their resources more on founding programs with different mental illness institutions to provide these people with education and chances at a better, more stable life. Tamín Antoniades placed all of that emotion, all the burden he and his studio must feel at times, on the character of Dillion. Dillion is the voice of Tamín Antoniades. Dillion represents the normal human being, the person that has nothing to do with psychosis but chooses to become part of it. In simple words, Dillion represents us, the sane ones. Dillion is the only character in Hellblade that is not psychotic or related at the start to a psychotic person. He is not Senua's father, like Zynbel. Neither is he a fellow Gelt like Druth. No, Dillion was the son of the clan chieftain, skilled, intelligent, good-looking, and with a bright future ahead. There probably were a fair number of families that wanted to marry their prettier and sane daughters to the future leader of the tribe, and yet Dillion chose Senua, the outcast. Originally, because he was attracted to her, obviously, and considered her not as a tainted person, but simply different and misunderstood, and eventually because he genuinely fell in love with her. However, the fact that he could overlook a normal, easier and, to be frank, healthier life for the sake of a broken person speaks tons on his regard as a compassionate human being. Living with people that suffer any sort of mental illness or incapacity is not easy. I still remember how it was for my family to take care of Dad's father, who suffered of Alzheimer, and the mark it left on all of us economically and emotionally. So Dillion's love was pure and strong for falling in love with Senua, and he ultimately was a godsend for remaining with her for so many years after realizing the depth of her insanity. Dillion and Senua embody so well the history of Tamín Antoniades and Ninja Theory. Once this small studio realized the depth of the problem and how they just barely scratched the surface with Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, they haven't been able to walk away. Through Dillion's character, Tammy Antoniades teaches us to be compassionate and patient, and to go out of our way to help others when the chance presents itself. Dillion is also important because of the contrast he creates between Zynbel. While Zynbel abhors his daughter because of whom she is, Dillion, on the other hand, embraces her because of whom she is. Dillion's virtues are many and unquestionable. However, there is also another side to this story, which is also necessary to point out and explain. The problem with Hellblade, and mainly Dillion's relationship with Senua, is that it is too one-sided. Let me explain. Through the course of the game, we see Dillion always supporting Senua, which is good, but we never see Senua supporting Dillion. We never see anything outside of Senua's mind, nothing to put her story in contrast with. What type of a life these people lived? What problems did Dillion have? After all, he was looking after his old blind father, while at the same time leading a clan of superstitious 8th century people that didn't like or trust Senua, and most probably didn't approve of his relationship with her. I can imagine many must have been the times in which Dillion had to demand obedience by the sword, for otherwise the clan members would have lynched them both. All the while, pestilence is rampant, sickening and killing many of them, and Vikings are invading the land, and it is only a matter of time before their village gets spotted and raided by the enemy. In simple words, Dillion had a lot of problems, and it is never a consideration in the way Senua is written that she is only worsening his burdens. Senua, during all sequences, easily relapses into her miasma, and Dillion always has to pull her out of it. Even when his father dies, Senua is unable to support him, turning mad again, and even worse, blaming herself for the old man's death so deeply, in fact, that she decides to commit suicide, the ultimate act of irresponsibility. Poor Dillion, of course, had to leave his dead father on the floor to run after his lover to prevent her from doing something stupid. I might sound insensible here, as if I do not understand what the game is all about, but the point is that each and every one of those sequences across the game are written in the same fashion. You never feel as if the years of love and relative happiness with him have strengthened her enough as to be able to resist her fits when they happen. In the last sequence of the Trials of Odin, the one in which Senua attempts to kill herself, she looks almost as weak as she was while still living with her abusive father around 15 years ago. You never hear Senua whispering to herself that she has to remain strong for Dillion's sake. No, she always relapses and falls back to square one each and every time, and Dillion, each and every time, has to be there to support her, always without the promise that things might be a little better the next time. The sad truth about this type of situation is that they often get worse with time. I know that Hellblade is focused mainly on portraying psychotic experiences, but the game also tells us a story, and that story happens to be a love story. Dillion is not Senua's doctor. If he was, there wouldn't be any problem. He just helps her, that's his job. However, Dillion in the game is more than that. These people lived together. They were lovers, and they were even considering getting married. Surprising it is that Senua never got pregnant during their relationship. Therefore, Senua owes Dillion in particular more than we ever see her give him. She is not his patient, she is his partner. And since we never see anything outside of her own world of madness, the only thing we see is Dillion supporting her and never Senua supporting him. Therefore, their relationship ends up appearing as one-sided, what is wrong in the overall moral of the story. Dillion's message to all players is very moving and understandable, and applicable to a degree. but his message can fall short because the man, ultimately, was a martyr who dedicated his life to Senua without knowing if all of this effort and all of this suffering was going to be worth it in the end. Yes, she got better through time, but Dillion was dead by the time that happened, so he never got to see the fruits of his labor. He even got his head chopped off by Senua and then thrown off the board. The biggest irony of this story is that Senua was trying to bring Dillion out of the Viking hell, but ends up dropping his head within Viking territory. So she, in so many words, ended up delivering his soul to the enemy, or at least that's how I felt when I finished the game. Senua couldn't even bury the head where the rest of the body was. Dillion is in pieces but not in peace, because he died without knowing where Senua was, if she was even alive or not, if she was going to get better or worse, and now parts of him are in enemy territory. A very pretty and groovy fate for a man that did so much for Senua. Viewers, do you get my point? This is exactly the type of life that I do not want to live, and neither do you. In real life, how many people, therefore, will choose to be godsons like Dillion? Not many. People need stability in their lives, and people need and deserve a reliable partner, and Senua is never reliable as a partner in the whole game. You can see other mentally unstable or physically broken characters in other stories that offer a better case. Yes, they have their problems and they need help, but they also compensate with things that those that love them will appreciate. But Senua really is not portrayed like that. You might think she is, but play the game again, and you will realize that she isn't. This is one of the things that I liked so much in the portrayal of Hugo the Rune in the A Plague Tale series. Hugo is the central character of the story, but he doesn't behave as if he is the center of the universe. His story is put in contrast, both positively and negatively, with the story of the other characters in the games. Hugo, in the first game, demands more from his sister, but changes when faced with the burdens of choice and responsibility, becoming more supportive and self-aware by the conclusion of the first game and through the whole second game. This is without saying that Hugo, by the conclusion of the second game, was only 6. Hugo wanted to live. He wanted to grow and enjoy life, and most importantly, he wanted his family to remain together and safe. He couldn't fulfill many of these things, however, because he was dealt a very poor hand since birth. A deceased blood, an uncaring mother, and a violent rattle-brained sister with too much to prove that murders him. Senua, on the other hand, was dealt better cards as she grew older. Yes, she was mentally ill since birth, and yes, she underwent a lot of traumas as a child that will forever mark her. But then, at 15, she met Dillion, who treated her fairly, and gave her the strength to run away from her father and start a better life with him. Senua had the chance to live a happier life, because, despite her mental illness, despite her traumas, and despite the general distrust of the rest of the clan's people, she had Dillion, who was smarter and more attentive than Amicia, and had more loyalty for Senua than the one Beatrice had for her children. Dillion offered Senua a better life, but she, instead, chooses to give more weight to Zyndel's cruel and religiously pessimistic preachings over Dillion's more positive and rational words. So Dillion spent his life giving to this woman more than she ever realized was being given to her, and certainly more than she gave in return, thus making him seem more like a martyr than anything else. And that is, ultimately, the greatest mistake in Tamin Antoniada's masterwork. You cannot build conscience upon the foundations of a martyr, because real life goes way beyond the idyllic and over-romanticized set pieces of a love story. That was my biggest issue with Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice when I played that game more than a year ago, and that is why I would prefer that this character that is being suggested in the second game is Dillion, however way they bring him back, because if they do, they would have the chance to address these issues and turn the relationship between him and Senua into a more balanced affair. The morals of this story are very beautiful, but they must be applied both ways. In simple words, people like Dillion look after people like Senua, but people like Senua, please look after your Dillion, because he's human and he bleeds. Never take him for granted. A healthy relationship happens when there is a balance between the people involved. All actions must be returned one way or the other. Otherwise, one side is abusing of the other. These are truths that are applied to all sorts of relationships, romantic or not, and no conditions, not even psychosis, will change these truths. Conditions like Senua's psychosis is like mitigating circumstances. It is a consideration that you have for that particular person, because that person is truly afflicted with a particularly troublesome burden, but it doesn't exonerate the person entirely. You have examples like John Nash in the film Beautiful Mind. Yes, that man was crazy, and his wife understood that and therefore tolerated him more than not, but he was still her husband and father to their kid, and she expects him to deliver on those regards despite his afflictions. His mental conditions didn't exonerate him entirely from his responsibilities as a grown-up man, a husband and a father. This sense of duty is in great part what motivates him to improve his situation, because he feels he is failing his family, and his mental condition is depriving him of his chances at living a relatively normal and fruitful life. This might sound harsh, but believe me when I tell you from personal experience and observation of the human condition, that duty is sometimes the best therapy. That is the whole point of the Senua scholarship from the same ninja theory. By having mentally ill people tutor other mentally ill people, they end up helping one another. The actual patient gets to be treated by someone that truly understands what he or she is going through, and the former patient who got the Senua scholarship finds purpose in helping other similarly afflicted people. And this goes beyond mentally ill people. Insane people must also look after sane people, the same way sane people look after insane people. It's both ways, ladies and gentlemen. That's how it best works. We, as human beings, can love, respect, and care for those that are different to us, whether that difference be mental, racial, genital, religious, political, and so many more. But those that are different to us must also love, respect, and care for us as well. Only then can we have true balance between people and get a little bit closer to a safer and more fruitful society. Senua and Dillion are important characters, mainly because of what they stand for. Imagine a sequel in which Dillion needs Senua's help, and we get to see Senua do for him now what he did for her in the past. What an epic, heartwarming and necessary sequel that would be. It would be the perfect validation to both characters. Dillion would finally get the love and care he deserves, and Senua would prove that all the love and patience that was given to her was not in vain in the end. That would certainly be the perfect validation for these characters and what each one of them stands for, and the sequel that we, as fans of these characters since 2017, deserve. This would be the type of soul-infusing story, with the type of morals that this world, which is filled with so much unnecessary strife and grief, needs.
He gave her the sword with which to fight in more ways than one. And she gave him her word, never to surrender. All she needed was a little help.